You're a teacher, you want to get hired, here's what to put in your portfolio. But let's be honest, there's a teacher shortage, so you're probably going to get hired. But with that said, wouldn't it be nice if you had a really nice portfolio to bring to your interview? Hello, Marielle here, and today's teaching tip is all about the documents that I include in my teaching portfolio that got me hired on the spot. And I'll let you in on a little secret. Since I was involved with interviewing and hiring teachers for 8 years as a school administrator, I know exactly what they're looking for. I've reviewed hundreds of resumes and portfolios over the years, and while each school and position can have very specific criteria they're looking for, there are some key items that every teacher portfolio should include. And don't worry, I'll be sure to tell you at the end where to get free, super beautiful and professional templates for all of your portfolio items, which is really the fun part of this process. I'm going to jump right in because I know you want to know the specific items to include, but really quickly, let me steer you away from creating an online-only portfolio. It's okay to have an online one in conjunction with your paper one, but you absolutely want to have a physical portfolio with you at the interview. And here's why. I honestly believe that 50% of your success for getting hired is dependent on how well your interview goes, and 50% is you being able to hand over the proper documents on the spot. Most school district HR departments handle a huge volume of thousands of employees, and there's like 3 people in charge of it. It sounds bonkers, but I'm telling you, eliminate any of the hurdles for them actually hiring you, and your chances increase drastically. Because of that, this tutorial is going to be very detailed and thorough because I want to make sure you are fully equipped to enter your interview prepared and confident. Okay, here are the contents of my teaching portfolio. The 3 main sections you want to include are application materials, classroom teaching examples, and a skill set you want to highlight. For me, that's educational technology, but maybe for you, it's classroom management or project-based learning or integrating art and music into your general ed classroom, whatever you want to showcase as a talent and passion. The first of the 3 sections in my portfolio have all of my application materials. Some of the actual documents in this demo are just placeholders so as not to show any confidential information. However, I'll be sure to go into detail about what sorts of information should be included. It doesn't matter where you are in the job search timeline, you need to have these things ready first before any other portfolio items. A generic letter of introduction so that you can tailor it for specific job postings, a current resume, and at least 3 letters of recommendation. It's totally fine if you're still in a credentialing program and haven't even finished school yet, because here are some people that you can get letters of rec from. Your instructors, definitely get it from your master or mentor teacher, the principal at the school where you do your student teaching, and you can even get some from other teachers in the program. Let me give you an insider tip. Letters of rec are always required, but they're not the most important part of your portfolio. I mean, don't get crappy ones, but don't stress if they're not these amazing multi-page novels. They just need to give overviews of why you're a good candidate for a teaching position. If the school's interested in hiring you, they're going to spend more time calling your references and speaking with them directly. So really, the letters are just an introduction to that conversation. All right, let's talk resumes. There's thousands of videos on what to include in a teacher resume, but here's what I'm looking for when I was involved in hiring. What I'm about to say is highly controversial. It needs to be on one page. I once read over 50 resumes for a single hiring position, and I'm telling you, the multiple page ones barely got a second glance. If your resume is 5 pages, it's for one of these 2 reasons. You either padded it with hundreds of bullet points of fluff, or you're a job hopper, which is a huge red flag. Keep it to 1 page, make it quick and easy to read, and you'll be sure to stand out from the crowd. Also, do not ever lie on your resume. Lies are easy for employers to fact check, and it's not worth jeopardizing your career or your reputation to try and look good on paper. It's totally fine if you have a gap in your work history, like I had to take time off to birth children, and it's okay to have a gap, any gap, but just be sure to address it in your interview in a way that feels appropriate and professional for you. If you're interested in knowing exactly the types of information and sections I include in my resume, let me know in the comments and I can dive more deeply into that topic. Okay, the next set of paperwork is probably the most important part of your portfolio. They're the documents that allow you to teach in the state and county in which you're applying. These include any forms of ID or work permits for your state or county, although that's going to be specific to your region. For teaching, I like to include my multiple subject teaching credential for the state of California. Make sure it's up to date and don't ever let it lapse. If your county requires any teaching permits or certificates, include them here. If you're not sure what to include, go to the Teaching Commission website for your state and then cross-reference that with your school district's licensing and permitting requirements that they say on their district website. If you have any questions, I suggest reaching out to your local county Department of Education so that they can walk you through the process. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a teacher candidate receive an actual job offer only to find out that they didn't have the proper documentation to teach in my state or county. Research it ahead of time and you'll be totally prepared for the process. In this section, I've also included my bachelor's degree, which happened to be signed by Arnold Schwarzenegger. You'll want to include all of your college transcripts. In public school, the teaching salaries are determined by the number of college units you've earned and the number of years you've taught. So it's very important to have your transcripts ready to go to make sure that you are compensated properly. Keep in mind that college registrars get very busy and backlogged with requests, so make sure you have a few official copies that are sealed, but open one and make a ton of copies for your portfolio and other resources. Additionally, most public school salaries are public record, so you should be able to search the school district you're applying to and get a rough estimate of your salary range. Keep in mind that each district has their own rules about counting years from other districts or schools, though, so be sure to ask the HR department about that when they are determining your salary. The last documents for the application materials section are my teaching evaluations. I'm actually pretty surprised how many people don't include these in their portfolio, but as the interviewer, I actually give these a bit more weight than the letters of rec because these show me how you were as a classroom teacher. And if you've only student taught, then be sure to include the evaluations from your mentor teacher in this section. Two other documents that are worthwhile to include in this section would be proof of a negative tuberculosis test and the receipt for your live scan fingerprinting if you are applying for the same district that you've been working in. If you don't have either of these, don't worry. They usually come after you've accepted the position, but if you already have them done, your onboarding can be much faster. And double check before you pay for these out of pocket because you might not have to. Most districts cover the cost or at least a portion of it once you get hired. Before I go over the next section, which is the teaching materials, I want to give you some words of caution. Like I said at the beginning, I've reviewed hundreds of teaching portfolios, so I'd like to give you some insight into what it looks like from the interviewer's perspective so that you can have the best possible chance of getting hired. Keep in mind that your portfolio isn't sent to the interviewers ahead of time. Most likely, you've brought it with you to the interview and you're flipping through it with them towards the end of your meeting. That means that the interviewers have around 10 seconds max per page to review what you've brought as you're talking through it. You can always bring supplemental materials in your bag if they request it or if there's something else you want to reference, but it doesn't all have to go in your portfolio. And while you're at it, make a ton of these, or at least make one for every interview you're going to. Leave it with them for a few days. They're going to be interviewing many candidates, and they are not necessarily going to have the time to look at it when they're speaking with you, but if you are a qualified candidate, they absolutely will reference it later. They can also share it with other administrators or colleagues that are part of the hiring process, but maybe just weren't at the interview. I've actually even had cases where I've walked a candidate's portfolio over to the HR department so that they could start the onboarding process and salary determination right after the interview while we were calling the person to offer them the position. So make their job easy to hire you. All right, moving on to the next section. Section number 2 includes all of my classroom teaching examples. These documents should be specific to your skill set, but I'll show you what I've included in mine. The first is my classroom management plan. This is a very simple overview of my classroom management procedures, but I think that most important part of having this is that it makes you go through the process of actually writing out precisely what your plan is. In your interview, you are absolutely going to be asked a question about your classroom management plan. And even if you haven't taught a class on your own yet, you should have a very clear idea of what it looks like. The sections in my plan include my management overview, beginning of the year procedures, and teachable moments, which is where I explain how I see most disciplinary issues as teachable moments, not as an opportunity to dole out punishment. And then I break down each of my routines that I employ to show how my class is structured. I have morning routines, managing workflow, and end of the day routines. Your classroom management section is a great way to showcase your teaching philosophies and how they apply to classroom systems. And like I said earlier, if you go through the exercise of having to actually come up with this document, then you're going to have your answers internalized for your interview, and you're going to have no problem answering questions about it. I'll include a link to this very simple template I use, but you could certainly come up with your own plan outline if you want it. Next, I include actual examples from my lesson plans for when I was teaching in person and distance learning. I think including both of these is really important because for me, I think it demonstrates your ability to pivot and to be adaptable to challenges in education. I'd recommend not making these too perfect. It's going to be very obvious what were real plans you used with actual children and what are fantasy plans that only work in a perfect best case scenario. Next are examples of how I build a school-home connection early in the year by reaching out to parents on day one. I think partnering with families is one of the most important things you can do early in the year, so I wanted to showcase that in my portfolio. I actually have a video on this exact process that I will link in the description box. The third and final section of your portfolio should be a personal skill set that you wish to highlight. Mine is EdTech. When we first transitioned to online teaching, there was a pretty steep learning curve when it came to teaching through Zoom. So I created a Google Slides presentation with embedded videos to help serve as a resource for teachers and students. I also have QR codes that link to my YouTube channel with teacher tutorials and an example of how I solicited feedback on my teaching from other colleagues and students. Now, as promised, here is where you can get some awesome templates. I highly recommend getting a free educator account with Canva. Canva is absolutely not a sponsor for this video. I have no connection to them whatsoever, but I've just been using them for years, and I think they have a lot of really great resources for educators. With the free educator account, you'll have access to all of their content, which includes thousands of beautiful and professional templates. Strangely enough, the one I used for my portfolio is actually a yearbook template, but you can find one specifically for portfolios on their site. There is no need to spend money on TPT. Canva has awesome templates completely for free. Now that you have an awesome portfolio, it's time to level up your email signature so that you get noticed from the crowd. Emails are often the first type of contact you have with an employer, so be sure yours are friendly and professional. Check out this video that shows you how to include a picture and custom links in your email signature, which is perfect for job seekers, all for free. And if you're a first-year teacher, then check out these videos that go through the foundations of teaching for your first year and beyond.